Hey everyone, Thierry the Sword Guy here, and welcome to Wootz, there it is. If you get the reference, well done you. I have been asked a few times lately, after my two posts on Wootz and pattern welded weapons last week, about where I find or where anyone can find Wootz and pattern welded weapons, because sometimes they are prohibitively expensive and they're just hard to find. And the answer I give usually is quite long-winded, so I thought I'd make a little video. The answer, in short, is you can find pattern welded and Wootz weapons everywhere, and they will often be in places you won't expect, and they will be in places where, like even parts where you don't expect. So the basic understanding that I've heard from lots of collectors is, oh, that is a lovely Indian weapon. It has a gold hilt, it has silver, jade, stones, whatever, and the hilt is lovely, therefore the blade will be lovely. That can be true, but it can also be a bit of a misconception. The blade, I have noticed on very high quality hilts, is more likely to be Wootz, but it is also, it's a gamble. It doesn't take into account how much personal choice there is in historic weapons. So wherever you go in the world, whether it's Indo-Persia, China, Japan, Britain, America, weapons with incredible blades have been put in both decorative hilts and very plain ones. It depends what someone wants. Some people want to look the business as well as being the business. Some people have incredible weapons and they're just functional tools and they don't care how they look, or they don't want them to look fancy. And on the other hand, there are also ceremonial weapons, or people who are, I won't say more for show, because there's nothing wrong with just a plain carbon steel blade in an Indo-Persian hilt. But there are some people who just wouldn't want or couldn't get a nice Wootz or pattern welded blade, but they could get a gilt or stone inlaid hilt. So this is a really good example. That is cut steel and silver. Hopefully that is focusing. And it's just a very nice sword, and it does have, if the camera will catch it slightly, it does have a pattern welded blade. This one I knew about when I purchased it, but I've had a few pattern welded blades since then, and about half of them were on very nice hilts. The other half were in plain hilts. Well, collectors would call them plain. I think they're very nice because they usually have very sharp lines. They're very angular and geometrically pleasing hilts. They're not munitions grade by any stretch of the imagination. So that is one example of where you would expect to find a good blade. Then you find things like this, oddities, but it is incredibly well worked. So again, silver inlay, and the blade, there we go, it is a form of pattern welded Damascus steel. This one is far more recognizable. You could spot this a mile away. And this sword from Afghanistan, northwestern frontier, also it's a high ranking sword. And it is another example of where you would commonly find one. I have an axe which I got the other day, and it is from South India. Not a lot of weapons in South India tend to be incredibly wootsy or pattern welded. I've noticed it's more of a northern thing, but this one, silver inlay, wonderful pattern there. So that is a very interesting combination, but again, it is a very showy piece, and it's mine. This is my axe, and I love it. So you will find it in the obvious places. Decorated hilts. Here is one where, a good example of that, I purchased this guitar quite a while ago now because it has wonderful relief engravings and the fullers are incredibly decorative. It also has gold Koftgari all over and these wonderful panels in between the Koftgari, which generally means that it will be a pattern welded or Wootz grip and sidebar as well. It's not true in all cases, but if you see these lovely panels on the side where there's a space in between the decoration, often it means that they're showing off a very nice metal underneath. I have polished and etched a little bit of this and it does show a very fine grain, but it does fade quite sharply. It goes away quite quickly, but it is one where I did buy it assuming it was Wootz. But in contrast, a while ago, I bought a large-ish collection of guitars and they had been screwed to the wall of a garage. They hadn't been looked after, they were all rusty, they were all pitted, and I've got two of them here. I have got round to wanting to clean them now. I haven't had a chance lately, but here are two examples. And you can sort of recognize what might and might not be Wootz. So this long one, it's got quite a crude grip, nice fullers, but not the usual form of what you would see. So I don't have much hope for this when it comes to Wootz or pattern welds. If I clean it up a little bit, do a respectful restoration, and just get all the gunk and rust off it that's been there since it was on someone's garage wall, then it'll be a nice guitar. Then there is this one, which is of a form that I recognise as often being Wootz. They're quite stumpy, they have these lovely deep fullers with a large central ridge, and if the camera will get that, that is a huge armour-piercing tip. And often these are guitar that would have been Wootz, though some of them do have bits that aren't Wootz, so occasionally there's a tip that isn't Wootz and the blades will be Wootz, but I'll get more onto that in a minute. So this one I have relatively high chances and high hopes that it will be Wootz, though if it isn't, it'll still clean up quite nicely when I can give it the love it needs. But I am going on form, not decoration. Then you find the weird ones. So this one is a Susan Pata Zulfikar. So it is a recurved Indian blade with two prongs, or two tips. And this one is one that's fascinated me for a while. I've had it for just over a year. It is now moving on to a new owner and it's relatively lovely. But interestingly, I got this and it was not Wootz. I purchased it and I think I swapped two swords and gave some money for this because I was just so invested in getting it. I love this. And it was sold to me as a plain blade. And when I went through it, I couldn't see anything. But I went to a show, an antique arms show not too long ago. I took this with me and it was raining a lot. And when I came back, I decided I was going to clean absolutely everything I took with me, which was, I don't know, about 60 swords. And they all needed TLC, so I gave them the love they needed. And the Indo-Persian ones, I had a new bottle of ferric chloride, the etchant I use, very diluted, and I thought I'd just etch them. So I didn't have high hopes. I pretty much knew everything I had that was etchable and was pattern welded or Wootz. But I just went through it and brought out the patterns stronger, gave things a bit of a polish, and etched them. So on this one, I did a small section here. I polished a little window or mirror into it and then etched it. No Wootz, no pattern weld. Same up here. Etched it around the meat of the blade and there was absolutely nothing. Then I etched the rear tip and there I found, yes, it is focusing nicely. There I found Wootz. So I have no idea how this was made, whether it was a sword blade that has had the tips added after the sword blade was broken or cut down for this purpose. It may have been purpose built, but one thing I have seen is people, they miss out on the Wootz sometimes, and I'm sorry I got this without you knowing it was Wootz, you know who you are. Sometimes people miss out on Wootz because they don't check different areas. You have no idea where Wootz is going to turn up. It might turn up in the edge. It might turn up in the rear of the blade. I have no idea why that's happening because Wootz is quite brittle. As far as I'm aware, the rear of blade should be subtle and the edge should be hard, but is what it is. And the tips of blades are quite often Wootz, just even if it's just the last 2 inches or so. And on this one, it was just luck, and well, the new owner of this, when it goes off, now has a Wootz Susan Pata Zulfikar, and that is weird. That is fun. As far as I know, it's the only one out there, and yeah, it's quite cool. Another thing to watch out for is scarf welds. Scarf welds are usually where something has been damaged very badly or snapped completely, and the blade is just welded back together. Metallurgically, not sure if that's the best thing to do at all times, but needs must. Maybe it's a lovely sword, maybe it's a family sword, it'll just hang on the wall. Maybe you're in the middle of a campaign and you have access to a blacksmith, but not someone who will make a sword for you. So I have seen scarf welds, so a tiny little sleeve of Wootz around a non-Wootz blade. And they are quite interesting. I collect welded and repaired British swords, and they are very interesting too. Then the reason you should etch other things. So this is a 1788 pattern British infantry hanger. Well, it's a 1788 pattern hilt used for cavalry, infantry. Navy has their own version. This one is in silver with horn and silver wire. And the blade on it is a killage, most often associated with Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, or Persia. And it's been put together. I have no idea why. I have an article on this sword on my site. I will link that below as well. And it may be a battle trophy. It may have been a gift either from Britain to India or vice versa. Or it may have just been a weird request, and it has ended up being a really lovely sword. It feels good in the hand, it has a nice amount of curve, and like lots of Indian weapons, it has, there we go, an armor-piercing tip. So this sword can punch through mail, it can slice, and the yeoman is still relatively sharp. So it is a double-edged sword for all intents and purposes. But as you can see on the ricasso, there's that gold Kofgari, the inlay, hefty ricasso where there was most likely langets originally, and the blade, there we go, that is a lovely tight grain Wootz near the tip. So that is a British sword. Depending on who I talk to, I call it an Anglo-Indian sword, an Indian sword, or a British sword, because it just keeps the peace. Some people call this a Turkish sword as well. And it has Wootz. So don't limit yourself just to checking Indo-Persian weapons, because it may pop up anywhere. Oh, and fun little thing. There we go. If you can see that, the Wootz ends So the tip, the armor piercing tip, there we go, is just steel, not Wootz. So that is a welded tip on this sword. So, in conclusion, if you're looking for Wootz, look anywhere. Have fun with it. Don't think if you see a shiny hilt, you will be guaranteed Wootz. Sometimes it can happen, sometimes not. Sometimes you can recognize the forms, sometimes not. A good quality blade does not need to have a pattern in it, which is a mistake I've seen some collectors make. And some I've seen them make it over and over again because they've been told that gold or jade hilts have Wootz blades. But yeah, etch away, use Matthew Forde's method, and it'll work out well, and have fun.